Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Timber!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone, whenever and wherever you are. This is episode 208 of Americans Watching the Footy, our 2024 semi-finals preview. I am Benjamin Castle in San Diego.
I'm Ethan Castle, coming to you from South San Francisco. I guess this is worth reminding people that what we call a semifinal isn't what Australia calls a semifinal. Well, he's over there. But anyway.
Yeah, to us, a semifinal is, I guess, what your prelims are, but just Final Four.
The semifinals are what's supposed to get you from 4 to 2.
Yeah, so instead, I guess we're going from a half final to a 2/3 final. I feel like we have this discussion every year, and it always leads absolutely nowhere every time.
I feel like it's still worth clarifying just to, just in case we have new, American listeners, because as much as it hasn't gone that way, our whole objective has been to get more Americans interested.
It's happening very slowly,
but it is happening.
I'm very thankful to my housemate Dana for sitting down and watching Sydney Derby with me this past week. And again, I wonder if I started her on too good a game. Now, because we've only got 2 games to preview this week, we're going to be doing something somewhat familiar, actually, beforehand, and giving the postmortems for the 2 clubs we lost this past week. Yes, they've been found, just not in finals.
These are going to be fun. I think they've given us a lot of material. 2 of the clubs have kind of been at the center of the universe, basically.
Clubs about which we have stronger opinions and have been proven correct, especially, I guess, in coaching and selection this past week. So I will spin a wheel for this, as is tradition, even though there's only 2, and we'll stay chronological because the first team to have been eliminated from finals this year was the Bulldogs, who, after finishing 6th at 14-9, despite the second best percentage of 125.1, were ousted by Hawthorn on Friday night by 37 points. The Bulldogs were the only club to not lose 3 straight games all season, but they only won more than 2 straight once. A 4-game stretch between rounds 18 and 21. We've talked time and again about this team just not being consistent enough. We had more depth contributions a lot of times this year, but then there were fewer of the stars who were all on at the same time.
I think more significantly, there was just not a lot of room for some of those depth guys to get some traction and really get settled into their roles. Like Riley Garcia getting omitted after an 8 or 9 tackle performance. It's like, what more could you want out of him?
Seriously, you guys? The fuck?
And really, the only guys that I see them actually giving the proper sort of development to, where they can actually gain some traction and get into a rhythm, have been Harvey Gallagher and Joel Frazier.
Gallagher was backed in despite a bit of a struggle to end the year, had gotten the Rising Star nominee pretty early on, had cooled off but showed his potential in that midfield to half-forward mix. And something on that smaller end is another piece the Bulldogs need to just be taken over the top, because they've got Cody Waitman there, and Waitman, as I've often said, can play above his size, but that second piece there that can be small in the forward pocket hasn't really been established yet. Could Gallagher be the one to do that? Could it be Arthur Jones, who was stiff to miss out after his sub-performance in round 24 in Ballarat? That's kind of a tip of the iceberg thing, though.
As I've hammered home and talked about, especially when we were reflecting on the Elimination Final the other day, Like, this was a team in need of a spark plug, and Waitman was kind of all alone in that regard. Like, that's where you really could have used someone like Jones or Riley Garcia. This team did make a couple of moves this year that were outstanding, specifically bringing Rory Law back and getting Ed Richards into the middle, which the Richards move seemed obvious. The Law move didn't. This is Rory Law's 11th season, and somehow it took this long for someone to realize, like, you're a stud back there. Why was this not done sooner? Like, and this isn't a knock on the Dogs. This is a knock on, like, every other club that he's played for, that nobody managed to pick this up.
And I'm a bit surprised that it happened at this club, considering what we thought of as some decent defensive stocks, especially on the younger side, with Ethan Sleeper, Jed Buslinger, yet to have gotten an AFL game. He extended his contract 2 years through 2026, so he's not going to be heading home to the West anytime soon. I remember we said he looks like a cross between Bontempelli and someone else.
Sam Barry.
Ah, very good. Meanwhile, I was hoping for more defensively out of James O'Donnell in his first full year with the Bulldogs, because he was a Category B signing in April of 2023. He got a few more kicks on average compared to his first year, but has had some real defensive one-on-one struggles, and a very physical contesting player like Cal Shadir is a complete mismatch for him. Meanwhile, I also think about the time he flexed forward to kick 2-1 at the Gabba round 13 and how nothing else came from that.
I've made my point pretty clear with O'Donnell. I don't think he's a very good actual defender, but I do like him moving the ball, especially up the wing. But I just don't understand, like, their fixation with him and some of the other defenders when you're omitting guys like Buku Kamas. Like, is Buku a perfect one-on-one defender? No, definitely not. He's got room to still grow and develop, but I like his upside a lot more than some of the options they've thrown in there.
So between Kamas and Buslinger, there are a lot of questions to be asked in terms of selection criteria.
The one that really doesn't make sense to me, James Harms had like a couple of good games in the middle of the year and then got subbed out injured in round 13. So yeah, let's bring him back for finals.
Oh, what a fook.
There are so many things, and I feel so repetitive saying this at this point. It's just like, this club does shit that makes no sense. And it's frustrating because they've got all this talent, and it's not just the talent at the top. You know, like Tom Liberatore is starting to age a little. Still a damn good player, but he's not 21 anymore. Well, he is 21. It's his number, but he's not 21 years old. You're starting to get some better contributions out of some of this supporting cast, and then you just do things that make zero sense. And we saw this team play to their upside in their 4-game winning streak from rounds 18 to 21, which is the only time they won more than 2 games in a row this year.
Looking back at the VFL stats from their qualifying final win against the Lions, Harms was a leading figure in that game, kicking 1-2 from 37 with 8 tackles, but Riley Sanders had 14 tackles and was on the ball a decent amount. Caleb Poulter had his flash on the wing, inaccurate, but still fast.
Yeah, I'd rather see Sanders in there, who it feels like, you know, they alternate between saying such positive things about him and being so high on him, and then it's just like, you know, they just don't play him.
Meanwhile, Fuku was forward in that game, so where are you playing him?
That's a major point of frustration as well that I've had, is like, why are you putting him in all these different spots between the VFL and AFL? Like, isn't part of the purpose of the VFL to be, you know, to develop guys, get them in position to win games for you at the AFL level? And then playing them in a completely different position just isn't conducive to that at all.
Oh, and Arthur Jones kicked 3 goals from 12.
And you know what's so frustrating about this? Is that this is an easy team to like. When you're not playing against them, it's like, what does this team have that could possibly rub you the wrong way? Just a very enjoyable group of players. Like, nobody that gets under your skin. It would be a lot less frustrating if they weren't so dang likable. Then it would be fun.
8 years removed from their flag, I feel like there's like no reason to sadistically laugh at them, unless maybe you're a Sydney Swans fan.
I also think the free kick Bulldog stuff is totally overblown at this stage. In case you're wondering, the free kick count in the final against the Hawks, 22-13 Hawthorn.
I feel like it was acknowledged pretty quickly in the final that Hawthorne had gotten a good amount of early calls, and then I think things had evened out from there. No umpiring was going to flip that result. Hawthorne were too much for them at ground level, especially in defense, which was something that I expected. There's only so much Liam Jones can do in the air in conjunction with Rory Lobb, and then the one-on-one struggles elsewhere against a physical Hawks lineup. I feel like you could kind of see right through this Bulldogs defensive structure.
Said this before, will say it again. Liam Jones, really good in that sweeping role. Not going to win you a lot of one-on-ones, so, sometimes just by chance he's going to get stuck in that situation. But ideally, especially with Lobb now in this role as legit one-on-one defender, you're able to let Jones roam much more and have Lobb just stay back with whatever your toughest matchup is. It's amazing. You want to feel good about this team. You look at the season Rory Lobb had, where he went from, TikTok and not playing to all-Australian caliber defender over the portion of the season he played. If he does this over a full season, he is an all-Australian. That is right up there with Sam Taylor, Jacob Wiedering, Cal Wilkie. It's a different type of effectiveness. I'd say it's more like Taylor than the others. He's not necessarily racking up intercept marks. He's a lot more just shutting guys down. But when the ball comes his way, you notice. And sometimes it's more just asking why hasn't this guy gotten the ball? And it's that's because Rory Lobb's on him. Duh.
In terms of outlook beyond this year, the Dogs are likely losing both Bailey Smith and Jack McRae. They have both requested trades out. They have not confirmed exactly where to yet, though Geelong is the leader in the clubhouse for Basleika, as he's been for a while. And McRae has a few Victorian suitors.
Both Geelong and St. Kilda have been named as early contenders there. It's funny, Bailey Smith does not look like a Geelong player to me. He looks like he should be with one of Hawthorn, Collingwood, or St. Kilda, but I will gladly take him and give him a nice new home. I also certainly wouldn't mind Jack McRae. I don't know about the reality of getting both of those guys, but McRae had a couple of really good games. There were stretches where he went quiet and then got dropped and ended up in this sub role. That was really dumb too. Making a player of his caliber the sub and then not bringing him on early enough. He had a couple of massive games this season. He is 30. He's now at 249 career games. He had 30 disposals in the win over the Saints, 2 goals in a win over Collingwood, 24 in a win over Richmond, 2 goals in that win over North in round 23, a couple of games with 7 tackles, the final round against GWS and the Saints win. And yet it's just they're looking for opportunities to drop him whenever they can.
It would feel like a very Geelong thing to pick up a 30-year-old former All-Australian, but with not a huge draft hand, things could get complicated there. And as we're trying to bring in this newer group, you'd also have to bring him in with the promise of him actually getting some more consistent time.
Yeah, I was thinking to myself through all of this, where's there even a spot for a Cam Guthrie or even Mitch Nevin, which, great problem to have.
I could naturally think, based on the list additions in the past couple of years, largely through the draft, they can retool things on the fly. They don't have to do a huge rebuild, restocking of things. But then I remember that nothing about this Bulldogs team is linear, and that despite some of the top end of the list, and then this year, some of the greater depth contributions from players like Nathan Vandermeer and Lachie McNeil, especially post-bye, they have yet to finish in the top 4 in Luke Beveridge's 10 years.
It's funny. I feel better about the depth on this team's list than I have in quite some time. I actually feel really good about some of the personnel. It's just a matter of how they actually deploy and manage guys.
Is that a fitting segue to the Blues, all things considered?
Is it? I don't know.
I mean, for a team that made 6 changes into the elimination final, in which the scoreboard completely flattered them as they lost by 28 at the Gabba.
Yeah, they did not lose that game by 28. They got their asses kicked.
They lost 60-0.
Which sounds like something that would happen to the West's Tigers.
Oh, yeah, good care there with the pronunciation.
Does anyone actually say West's? Or how do people say these things?
They probably say it like Wes.
That's an origin tackle.
But Carlton, obviously beset by a bunch of injuries all year, got a number of players back at the right time and still made some puzzling decisions as to who would get back in with no substantial rehab appearance or anything. I mean, I get it's tough considering the VFL side didn't make it, but it could also be acknowledged that perhaps the re-addition of Sam Doherty 6 months after doing his ACL, and then Adam Chera.
Not woof. Sorry, I was like, wait a minute, why is he pausing? Oh, I got it.
And not just the re-inclusion of Chera, but being sent straight away to tag Lockie Neal with Chera's bad hamstring history. There were a bunch of disconnects there. I mean, a couple of the decisions were obvious, but those two, as part of a 6-pronged change, which saw Tom DeConing be the sub and Matthew Kennedy being subbed out for no reason after leaving his newborn.
Yeah, if I'm Matt Kennedy, I'm asking for a move to St. Kilda.
And the selection issues have been there for multiple years. Kennedy's been sent all over the place, and yes, he's capable of plugging a lot of different holes in a lineup, but I wouldn't categorize fullback as one of them, and yet he's been cast there sometimes, and he's too good to be the sub. Meanwhile, George Hewitt was omitted for a couple games, despite being their cleanest inside player this year.
And I just talked about this on our most recent episode, but Hewitt would win the non-existent finals polish turd if it was a thing. And I would even put him in my top 5, maybe even top 3 for that game, despite how everything went.
I wouldn't say he's like a foil to Patrick Cripps in the midfield, but a facilitator there where he's often be involved in overlaps on one side or the other, usually a more accurate field kick as well, and just had been disrespected by the selection for no good reason.
At the same time, there are things that you really can't fault this team for, namely the injuries. It's not like there were situations where they were, like rushing guys in and out or anything. It was just kind of stuff happened. And then you have issues like, Sam Walsh has such a great start after getting back from his injury, and then he just kind of fell off.
More role in the elimination final, but not much before him. I think that's why Hewitt's role was more magnified this year. I'd say things that really worked in terms of selection this year. Obviously, Elijah Hollins opened up Cripps to have his more comfortable role. Hollins being more of a player to flex into the forward 50, allowing Cripps to remain that main guy at the source. And then Zach Williams emerging as a viable half-forward option. I'm surprised he had done a bit less of the defensive job there, a bit less of the actual pressuring, but the goal-kicking form was there.
I had mentioned this before. It was weird that he got into this role without so much doing it as a high pressure forward. He did it as just kind of get on the end of stuff and kick goals. So I think there's still room where he could be an even more effective player despite his many injury issues.
Williams played 19 games this year, which is the most he's played in 5 years. And he kicked a career high 15 goals. He kicked 15-7. And it was only in round 10 that he moved back in the first place. 4 multi-goal games in that span, plenty of opportunities. I think the game for which I'll remember him the most forward was the game against Port in round 12. This was the day I was driving down to San Diego, which is another reason I remember it. He kicked 3-2 while also cutting off the angles for Dan Houston. That's the sort of full oval impact he can have when healthy. Meanwhile, he was put into that forward role because of a number of injuries there. I think Jack Martin was the main one that enabled that move. Jesse Motlop didn't play in the first half of the year at all. We always talk about the good sort of chaos Motlop can create, so a more complete year out of Motlop could be pretty damaging if you have his spark plus Williams' cleanliness plus Elijah Hollins' physicality. And then, of course, you've got the tall marking targets there. So I think forward, this group could be pretty set. And then in the back, Jacob Wiedering looks like he could sign on to a pretty significant extension and pretty much be a Blue for life. It'll be a nice reward for his first All-Australian jacket at long last.
My big picture takeaway of this team is that they had bad luck with injuries. They also had great luck with a lot of close games. So maybe the real expectation for them heading into next year, I mean, obviously there's a lot to come with draft and list changes and free agency and trades and this and that, but somewhere between 5th and 8th again, just based off of how I think things will kind of regress in various areas. I think it can kind of end up being a zero-sum game. Now, there's totally a world where they just come back from all of this and take that next step and continue their close game success.
And there's a world in which they don't have to deal with as many injuries and can get off to a similarly good start as they did this year. Remember, this team started 4-0 and 5-1. They were in second after round 16 at 11-4 before some injury concerns caused them to stumble late. But there were also just some bad losses there. They won just 2 of their final 9 games, including their final. And those 2 wins came against North and West Coast.
And that North game was hardly a clean win. North made them work for that. Sheasel in particular was outstanding that day, which, I mean, that's most days.
Yeah, just a 19-point win there over North. Meanwhile, 4 of their losses from round 17 onward were by less than that. You know, with both these teams that lost the Eliminators, there's a question on how much the blame rightfully falls on the head coach. Voss, I believe, is signed through 2026, and Luke Beveridge through 2025. Is it too early to establish a necessary pass point for next year for concerns to go away?
Absolutely too early. Got a lot of things that can shape that, so I would not give an ultimatum, or an old tomato for that matter.
You want to mention in terms of the trade talks, nothing reported about big potential losses, but at various times they've been linked to a move for Nick Haynes from the Giants to shore up some taller defense and maybe out toward the halfback flank. And then if Dan Houston decides to go to Victoria, Carlton has been considered one of the main suitors ever since Melbourne's case tapered off.
That's a funky one. Because I don't know how you'd really fit him in with that, like, move through the corridor with McGovern and Newman.
I could consider Houston a sharper and longer kick than some of those. And with McGovern's injury concerns and Newman's age, getting a bit younger there with a 2-time reigning All-Australian is the kind of move you don't pass up. I mean, when I consider Newman's kicks, I think of shorter things that free up play for the rest of the team, whereas Houston's tend to be longer and still relatively accurate.
Newman had some games where I thought he was really good. He also had some games where it was a lot of just like racking up possessions without doing much with it. The final was one of those. Other random Blues things, I guess this one sort of fit with final selection. Corey Durden, who does he have nudes of?
Well, with Matthew Owies having been suspended, it was a bit less clear as to who could step up there on the smaller side. Would you have just gone with a bit of a taller look, especially with Charlie Curnow still out, and brought in Ashton Moyer?
Yeah.
That's tough. I think that's tough also just with the Brisbane Lions' noted struggles against small forwards, and we could talk more about that on the other side of the break. But yeah, Moyer had some really nice efforts as a taller sub and has yet to get an opportunity in the 22. So expect that at some point next year, or doubt. My sleeper for the Blues this year was Brody Kemp, who just further complicates the forward look. He played a career-high 21 games this year, started out as a third tall defender, then injuries caused him to switch to a defensive forward job. He was excellent against the Eagles in round 23, kicking 4 goals and neutralizing Jeremy McGovern. But I don't know if, as of now, he is in the best 22 when you also consider Zach Williams' defensive forward acumen. Maybe Kemp could be a bit more physical from that, but also a bit shakier going toward goal. And then how you factor in the smalls, plus, as we just talked about, where Ashton Moyer fits in on the taller side. So that's yet to really feel settled.
My sleeper was
Orazio Fantasia.
And I'll admit it was mostly because of that. He did have a 4-goal game against Richmond. Other than that, he's kind of just a fringe depth forward option, which is fine. I think at this point, it's just like, this is what he is. No need to overthink it. He's shown why he deserves to be considered for selection, but he's also shown a few times why he isn't a lock into the lineup. And those things are fine.
Much healthier this year than in his stint at Port, so they can start looking up there. It's one of the few health positives this year. But as a mid-sized option who doesn't do as much towards the middle of the oval, he's in a weird spot on pretty much every list. You'd put Owies ahead of him as a pocket option. You want to see more out of Motlop as the goal sneak. And I don't feel as comfortable with him as sort of a half-forward flank. So he's a nice guy to be the next guy up, but I'm not sure if there's more from him at this point on his third club and at age 28.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
If this is your first time listening to us, welcome. Find us on Twitter at Americans Footy. Find me on Twitter at Castle Media.
Find the executive producer, his son, my nephew, on Instagram, a cat named Brian. And where is he right now?
He just went under the bed. He was on top of it, now he's under.
And I am individually on Twitter at BenjaminHK01. I think the biggest thing I've been doing this week is celebrating the scoregami from Monday night. Footy is a very scoregami-prone sport, so I'm not sure if that's fun or not.
It's too common to be that awesome. I mean, it's cool, I guess, but it's not like... It's not
mind-blowing?
Yeah. When I saw 32-19, it was like, ooh, I gotta check. It might be, and it was. So that was pretty cool.
I mean, those are two odd scores together, particularly 32 in American football.
Yeah.
And the Niners went about it in an interesting way also, with 6 field goals and 2 touchdowns. 2 NFL games this week in which the winning team kicked 6 field goals.
I mean, that would be the most common way to get to 32, I would think. Although there are ways with failed 2-point conversions and stuff, but just like the most conventional way to get to 32.
How about a single made 2-point conversion? 4 touchdowns, with one of them having a successful 2 and a field goal.
Yeah, but then like why, you got to ask like what motivates a team to go for 2 in these situations?
Say they're down 29-24.
Okay, but because I was thinking just like in the avenue of 32-19, you're probably not going for 2 if you're the ones in front.
But that's not the football on which we usually focus here. So let's shift to the 2 semifinals. And because logic, the second semifinal is before the first. Both semifinals this week are on FS2.
All right, then I will be directing people there. Good to know. Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn at the Adelaide Oval Friday night, 7:10 locally, 7:40 in Victoria, 5:40 a.m. on the East Coast, 2:40 a.m. here on the West Coast.
I have really been looking forward to a Port versus Hawthorn rematch for obvious reasons, considering the ridiculousness that was the ending in round 10 with 2 goals in the final half minute of clock time for Port to win it. There was first Willie Rioli after he was held by Blake Hardwick, and then off the center clearance and pressure in the forward 50, Darcy Burne-Jones hit a soccer. There's one thing when you've got an after the siren winner. It's something else, and I wonder if it's more intense for the home viewers because we see the countdown clock when you see a goal in like the final 10 seconds.
I mean, everyone's probably just looking at the time on their phones, but I feel like the stress of not knowing and realizing that the siren could go at any moment and could like cut off your chance, I feel like that's got to be the most stressful.
Yeah, I guess like sort of a Nick Davis type thing. Yeah, that was 80-79 back in round 10, and Hawthorn blew a 41-point lead by going into preservation mode way too early. Port only led for those final 2 seconds of clock time.
You know, looking back at that game, I don't know if I might have hit you with this, that like the crowd reaction was like much more tame than you would have expected considering the magnitude of the situation. It wasn't really like, you know, we didn't quite get a look at what it means to them, which was unfortunate.
Zach Butters had 16 disposals the first 3 quarters of that game. He matched that in the fourth alone. And he is good to go after some rib bruising in the qualifier forced about at halftime. The most consistent performer in round 10 for Port was, take it away, BT.
Here he is again, the horny one.
Yeah, how about you don't start him on the bench, Ken?
Or if you do, don't have him on the bench for 7 minutes. There's really no good way to start a player like that on the bench, because either you're going to make a super early interchange or you're going to leave him on the bench for quite some time. It's really a lose-lose situation. So just like, unless it's like a Dangerfield situation where, you know, like I've seen that done with him and he's an older player, so you can justify it some. Like, there's really no reason to do it with Horn Francis.
And especially against as physical a midfield group as Hawthorn have.
It is worth noting that group will not have Will Day. He has been ruled out once again.
Nash to Butters or Horn Francis, you think?
Knowing that he's coming in off an injury, I think they'd be more likely to go to Horn Francis and worry less about Butters. But at the same time, I could see them start on Butters and he ends up on Horn Francis.
Hawthorn has won both of the prior finals meetings. In a 2001 semifinal, John Barker kicked the winning goal for the Hawks with just under 2.5 left at the amazingly named
Football Park?
Yep, it was a park. They played football there. That was very much a team effort game in terms of nobody having more than 26 disposals or 2 goals. And then in 2014, a fantastic prelim and another 3-point margin in which Port were left to really rue their inaccuracy. They scored the final 4 goals and very nearly stopped the three-peat before it really took off.
So they kind of did a 2023 Crows.
I guess they did. They kicked 3-9 in the first and finished 13-16, whereas Hawthorn won, scoring 15-7, and Jared Ruffhead kicked 6-2.
I would love it if back then someone referred to it as doing a 2023 Crows, like well aware of what the 2023 Crows would end up doing.
So you mentioned earlier that Will Day will remain out. So too will Cam McKenzie. The new injury for the Hawks is Sam Frost, done for the year with bone stress at his foot.
Unit lost.
It's been confirmed that Jai Sarong will be playing his 5th AFL game this year and 10th overall. There was a question of whether it would be Sarong or Ethan Phillips, who has played 1 AFL game, and it was back in round 10 against the Power, but Sarong has had the better form for Box Hill.
I just would have gone with Changquath Jeff. I know it's tough bringing back off injuries and knowing how many soft tissue injuries CJ has had, but I still think he's the one that you would have the highest expectations for out of the available crop. And it's tough because, you know, he's a high ceiling player, but the floor can be pretty low, whereas Sarong seems like, I guess, the higher floor pick.
Would you have rather just backed in James Sicily and Blake Hardwick for more one-on-one time and Jarman Impey to be the main carrier?
That would work. Although Sicily one-on-one hasn't gone great.
Better in that regard this past week. Again, the week off before the finals, I think, really helped him just look more like himself.
You don't have to worry as much about the carrying when you can count on Amon and Impey for that.
Amon Impey, and it was starting to happen this past week. Massimo D'Ambrosio.
We're going to have a clip for it soon.
Once we get a really good one, yes. Although we know what the new clip from last week is. Congratulations, Dylan Moore playing his 100th, and that the Hawks won despite a minimized role from him was pretty impressive. It will be Luke Bruce 300th, and he'll be the ninth Hawk to reach that milestone.
This will be, speaking of milestones, game number 273 for Ken Hinckley, tying Mark Williams for most coached at Port Adelaide. We've got a couple of team things other than that Butters was cleared. Todd Marshall will be in. Josh Sin will also be in. But now they lose Ryan Burton to a calf injury. And looks like Jed McEntee, who just did basically nothing last week, will also be out. So without Burton, I think that raises some questions because you're already down Farrell in Houston. How do you expect to get things moving from the back? Is that just going to be on Josh Sin? Or who takes that role on? Because I trust this team elsewhere on the ground, despite how bad they looked last week.
It would have to be a more active game with some lower kicks from Darcy Byrne-Jones then, in addition to some more support coming back from the wing for Jace Burgoyne. All along, I had said Sin should have been in and trading off with Burgoyne, and that, I guess, prior to this week, could have opened up the door for more of a forward job for Byrne-Jones. It really complicates things now that he can't go back to the position where he's been much better in the past few years.
I guess that also does open up some more room to go through not just Burgoyne, but Logan Evans. So I do like that.
I mean, Evans had been one of the first distributors in the first place on a responsibility for mid-season addition, but I think he's up for it. Need a better game, though, in defense from him and a bit from Alir as well. Miles Bergman did everything he could, but he's one guy.
Need more out of Asaba, need more out of Zerk Thatcher, need more out of Lockie Jones. I think these injuries are probably what saves Quentin Narkle and keeps him in the team.
As the sub, at least.
Yeah, I would assume he just stays in the sub role. That seems like the most likely outcome there.
See a world in which Frank Evans gets demoted to sub?
And Narkle's just in as a forward?
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed.
Also allow Asaba to work back even more. I'm not inspired by this.
Seems like the odds makers aren't either, with Hawthorne being favored by 8.5. Did you say that again? I heard really choppy stuff.
8.5 seems very high. Now, you know, if you go on to like Squiggle and some of those, you kind of have like that bell curve of all the possible outcomes typically. You've seen that when you've done the ladder predictor thing, right?
Yeah, you feel like this is one of that wider range games.
Oh, no, I don't think there's a curve. I think it's just like completely even distribution. Like, you can tell me either team wins this by 10 goals or that it could go extra time. Like, every outcome is a possibility here. If I was setting the line, I'd probably put Hawthorne 3.5, 4.5.
But you, as would I, would have Hawthorne favored. Do you believe Hinckley is gone if he loses?
I don't know, because there's the whole possibility of West Coast. It's got to be about how it happens. You know, it's not just if they lose, it's how. But I was going to ask, and I think we've already answered, which team do you think is more likely out of Port and GWS to go straight sets? And I asked this because I just did some research before we started tonight. In the last 10 seasons, 8 of them have had a team go in straight sets. Only 2 that haven't were 2017 and 2020.
The Lions and Demons both twice. I guess Hawthorne was another one for whom it happened in 2018. That was their most recent finals campaign before this one. I would much rather obviously have a younger, maybe first-time head coach for West Coast. And you also do have to wonder about how the coach call could affect some trades. For example, if you're trying to get Liam Baker and Jack Graham, does bring in Andrew McQualter give you the inside track for that? I guess based on this selection news, Charlie Dixon is safe.
Seems like, at least for now.
So just a taller forward look for Port.
And I think he will benefit from having Marshall in there.
And also just not having to play on a former steeplechaser.
He had a nice view from the back. He got to watch a lot of Mark Blitz-ups. All right, semifinal. The other semifinal. The first semifinal, which will be played, of course, after the second semifinal. That's how the Coriolis effect works. GWS hosting Brisbane at NG Stadium. Saturday, 2:30 a.m. for us, 5:30 a.m. for the East Coast, 7:30 p.m. for a lot of Australia. As we already mentioned, another Fox Sports 2 game. This will be the third meeting between these two this year, the Giants winning both in Canberra and at the Gabba, which means this will be one of those very rare matchups, and I've yet to receive a response. I tried tweeting it at Sir Swamp Thing. Hope he's able to come up with a solution for this, because this is a pretty confusing one. Trying to find any other examples where teams have met 3 times in a season at 3 different venues outside of Victoria. You know, like Collingwood and Brisbane last year played at Marvel, the GABA, and the G. But how about 3 venues outside of Victoria completely, or even with 2 of them outside of Victoria? Also, while looking through Swamp's page, want to congratulate Max Holmes on pulling all possible AFL coaches votes from 1 through 10 over the course of this season. Last player to do that was Marcus Bontempelli in 2021.
So Max Holmes for a Brownlow runner-up?
Maybe not this year, but eventually.
And he actually has a chance because he's not a forward.
So yes, these teams met twice before. Round 7 was Darcy Jones's debut. He had 2 goals. The helmet became an instant sensation. Everyone wanted a photo and autograph after. Obviously, the Lions start off 0-3, and then it looked like everything was okay. And then this game was kind of like, shit, maybe things are not okay. And then obviously they were fine after that, but they got super rattled. Callan Ward really got under Lockie Neal's skin. Good games from Finn Callahan, Harry Perryman, and Jake Riccardi.
And Riccardi, and I think Riccardi's good to go health-wise, but I haven't seen anything about him potentially making his way in. So I guess they're holding Lockie Keefe in.
I mean, I'm fine with Keefe. I just think there are other solutions where you can make this work. I would just do it in place of Toby McMullen.
I think he's just going to make way for another Toby.
Bedford?
Yeah, he should be returning from his calf injury.
Here's a tricky thing then, it's like, who goes to Lockie Neal? Maybe you could also yank Xavier O'Halloran out of there. That's another one. He came on as the sub and didn't do a ton. I have also maintained that Lockie Ash hasn't been an especially important contributor. While he has had the disposal numbers, I do think you could ask other guys to do what he does. But having him in there does give an opportunity for Finn Callahan to do more in the middle, so I understand the arguments both for and against it.
And for Lockie Whitfield to be further downfield. Now, I think Ash does enter the spotlight a little bit because of his missed kick in the final 15 seconds or so of last week's derby. When I think of this matchup, I just think of the Giants' wealth of smalls. Bedford healthy in there along with Brent Daniels, Toby Green, and Darcy Jones in his helmet. I mean, that's what had the Lions' hands full in both their meetings thus far. In round 22 at the GABA, the Lions kicked 4-7 in the first quarter to be up 31-1 at quarter time. And then the Giants roared back. They kicked 6 goals straight to 1-4 in the fourth and won by 18. Sure, Brandon Starcevich had a very good game on Toby Green, and he was one of the Lions' best this past week in the Eliminator, but Daniels and Jones still got theirs. But neither of those were the best on ground in that game.
No, that would have to be James Peatling with 9 clearances.
9 clearances from 20.
Also, it was a very Darcy Jones game. He made more things happen. 2 goals off of 18 disposals. Could some of these things be hints towards America's Brownlow votes? Possibly. Maybe this is all a total ruse. We don't know. I mean, we do know, but
you don't.
And that's more important. Oh, yeah, this seems like a good time to plug. The night after the actual Brownlow, we're going to be dropping the video as a live YouTube premiere of America's Brownlow.
Yeah, probably in the 7 p.m. Australian Eastern hour. So 5 a.m. American Eastern, 2 a.m. Pacific. The one finals meeting that these teams have had was just like the 2 Port Hawthorn meetings, a 3-point game. And it was another one of those straight set situations that happened to the Lions a couple times that it became somewhat of a bit, even though it was, it was twice in 3 years. I guess that's enough for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has to go wrong for it to happen once. For it to happen twice in a 3-year span, yeah.
For it to happen twice in a row, you're just Melbourne. I'd gone back and watched a decent amount of this game because I loved taking a look at big finals runs. Obviously, this was part of the Giants' run to be humiliated in the 2019 Grand Final. The Lions got out to a fast start in that 2019 semifinal, but were inaccurate in the fourth, and it was Brent Daniels who kicked the winner. Much more injury news in this game surrounded the Lions, and Jack Payne has been cleared to play. You'd imagine he would be going directly to Jesse Hogan because he's the type to try and take away that top one-on-one to allow Harris Andrews to be more of a sweeper. Now, where do the other defensive things go? Do you need to have more one-on-ones against the smalls other than Brandon Starcevich?
That's tough. What would you do?
Just looking at the list from last week, if we're assuming a lack of changes, that would require a lot more in terms of one-on-one from, I think Noah Answorth would have to be a really important piece there, and I haven't been really convinced by his one-on-one defense as of late. I'm not sure if he'd be the type to be able to stand up to it. And then with the tall concerns as well, I feel like it's just going to have to be naturally by committee for this Lions team, and I don't like the thought of it. We've seen it be a big problem twice already, and even if you have 2 or 3 defenders playing their top games one-on-one, that still will likely leave at least one small to wreak havoc. Plus, Aaron Catman has worked his way into being a really nice second tall option. I think this was somewhat of a coming-of-age game from him. The other news from Brisbane, well, this will be Oscar McInerney's 150th, so another milestone there. And then he has not been selected at the AFL level since round 6, but is often an emergency. We know that Jared Lyons will be retiring at the end of this season. He's currently on 194 games in the AFL, 102 of those with the Lions after stints with Adelaide and Gold Coast. Thank you, Swamp, for this. This is a very small list of players, obviously, but Jared Lyons has played the second most games out of 3 club players to have never been on a Victorian list, only behind Jared Schofield.
What an awesome arbitrary stat.
I like my multi-club non-Victorian guys, or how about the 4-club, 4-state guys?
Tom Hickey, right?
And, yeah, it's Tom Hickey.
He's the only one?
Yup, he is the first and only as of now. I mean, 4-club guys are rare enough.
Giants favored by 4.5. I'm more interested in seeing, like, can we fill this thing up? I really hope so.
I am in doubt, particularly because it's not against a Victorian team.
Hopefully some Lions fans make the trip. You know, they showed up pretty well for some of their away games. You know, this kind of puts them right in between their Brisbane base and their Victorian base.
But it also means everybody's got to travel, and then are some saving for a prelim trip.
Yeah, you know, this would be a lot easier if you had a pretty cool, nice interstate highway system.
Hey, you know what's nice for the Lions is that one of their players will still be able to stay in-state while traveling to this game.
Oh, yeah. Good for Joe Danner. I wonder if he'll drive there.
What's going to be the deal with Joe? Is he going to go to Brisbane to fly with the team back to New South Wales? Or will he just drive from Byron Bay to Sydney, which is, let me see, that's an 8-hour drive.
Yeah, then he's probably flying from Brisbane.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's comparable to San Francisco to San Diego.
But it's not comparable to walking to Los Angeles like you're going to do.
Yes, I will, and that's probably mid to late December.
Any more details that come out on that, please make sure you share them.
Oh, I will right away, and I'm going to figure out if there's potential fundraising there. I should reach out to Barish about maybe USAFL fundraising.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I think unlike last week, we don't have as obvious of a choice for main character. Actually, you know what? Do we want to ban Jack Ginnivan from being selected because of just his, like, see you in 13 days thing?
You're not allowed to pick him. By the way, that's like the most non-controversial comment ever, and that's not even a story. You're also not allowed to pick Ken Hinckley because that's too easy.
I don't want to do an easy pick, but I want to do something on the field because I tried off the field last week. Ethan, how about you go first?
Let's go with Darcy Jones.
Just Darcy Jones?
Yeah, I think either he's going to have a huge game to help the Giants win. He's played well in both against the Lions, or he might have a late miss that costs him.
Just Darcy Jones, not his helmet?
I mean, his helmet's kind of associated with him.
Because you did the Giants-Lions game, I'm going to go to Port and Hawthorne. You know what? You did Darcy Jones. I'll do Darcy Burn-Jones then. I kind of put a spotlight on him already because he'll need to be better as an actual halfback. I mean, he's a former All-Australian halfback, but has switched to being a pressure half forward. I think at this point, there's really no way to put him back into the front. I know that's gonna sound confusing. So he's going to need to be a sharper kick. And I'm not sure how much he'll actually be able to do defensively, but this obviously needs to be a wake-up call, and it probably was just based on the qualifier, for the whole defensive group to shore up. If you have a net positive game out of both Sava Radagolea and Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, it'll go a long way. But I feel like we've talked about them in main character picks already this year. I'm not sure if Burn Jones has been.
Ooh, here's one more. Yeah, Asaba. You can always go with Asaba. Also, since we had Darcy Jones and Darcy Burn-Jones, that's 2 Darcys and 2 Jones, but only 1 Burns. So how about somehow Ryan Burns gets involved as well, despite not playing in either of these games?
Instead of Darcy Byrne, Ryan Burns?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think he's going to be part of any trade talks this week. It seems like he's pretty stable, and we like him. I don't know, for the Saints to get involved in any final storyline is just kind of a natural sickos thing. So why not? We sometimes think of ourselves as the sickos committee footy liaison a little bit. I feel like I'm going to need to post that Joe Danaher sickos meme.
Yes.
All right, next time you hear from us, we will be down to 4.
So yeah, it'll be a pretty short recap of just the 2 games, then I guess do the postmortems again before our prelim preview, yeah?
That seems right, but we can talk about it.
I mean, there's some similarities and some carryover between the recaps and the postmortems typically.
I got one more pretty long day to get through this week, but I'm looking forward to Footy being at the end of it. So make sure that you're following us at Americans Footy on a bunch of platforms. We got that handle, I think, everywhere where it matters. And if somebody else has it on TikTok, we don't care.
Maybe we also have it some places where it doesn't matter.
He's at Castle Media. I'm at Benjamin HK01. The executive producer is on Instagram at catnamedbrian. Good time of day. Enjoy the semifinals. Or don't. We really can't control you.